Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Ramon Tosta. I'm a certified AETA practitioner, and welcome everybody to the show. Today, we're gonna talk a little bit about a different species here. We're talking about small ruminants, goats and sheep, and we have three of probably like one of the guys that do the most amount of like small ruminant embryo transfer in the country and in the world here with us today. I have Dr. Neely, I have Dr. Fernandes, and I have Dr. Thompson. They are going to be speaking with us today about embryo transfer in small ruminants. At the end of the day, this podcast is just like a way for us to know more about the industry, what we have been doing, and to get to know one another more. Okay. So briefly, we're gonna introduce ourselves, and I'm gonna start with Dr. Neely. Then we're gonna go to Dr. Fernandez and Dr. Ted Thompson, and we're going to start right now. Dr. Neely.
Hello, um, I'm Dr. Clem Neely. I'm a 2013 graduate from Kansas State and been involved with embryo transfer since 2014. Started mostly on the cattle side, and in 2016, 2017, that's when we started working with goats. And it was one of those things that, as a newer practitioner trying to find my way, I was trying to find ways to kind of fill my schedule. And our cattle side, we're mostly beef. So, the summer months get pretty slow, and we kind of found a natural fit there with doing some goat embryo transfer work. And it's kind of, we stuck with it ever since. So, like I said, I'm an AETA member. I've been certified since 2016, and it's been kind of a nice journey. I'm really happy to be here on this podcast. I really feel honored. First of all, just kind of the heavy hitters that have been on here already. Um, you know, from Daniela and Dr. Looney and Clay and now being on here with Tad and Leo. It's a real honor to be here. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have.
Thank you, Clem. And Dr. Fernandez, please.
Hello everyone, I'm Leo Fernandes. I'm a veterinarian from Brazil and I graduated in 2006. I did work in Australia for 2 years where I learned most of my work on small ruminants. So my work today is 95 is sheep and goats, and I do work overseas a lot. I've been joining companies in America, UK. I work in New Zealand before, and every year I just basically do UK and America. Being I have my own center in Brazil as well, where I have a freezing lab and also a EVF lab. So my bases are from Brazil, but I do overseas work most of the time. I really appreciate it to be on this podcast, and thank you very much for having me here. And we talk a little bit.
Dr. Thompson.
Yeah, would share the same sentiment. The other two have greatly appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this group and to be connected to the AETA. It is a privilege and an honor. Appreciate that. I graduated vet school in 2006. I think I put my first laparoscope in a sheep in 2002 and kind of started that process. Had the good fortune to go to Australia in my senior year and spent 7 weeks over there on an externship. So that was really where I kind of got my interest in it. Growing up on a cattle and sheep farm, so the industry was near and dear to me prior to going to vet school. But then once I graduated, I actually thought equine was the route that I was going to be down. So I did a lot of equine embryo transfer and things of that nature to start. And then in 2012, my wife and I founded the RSG practice, or RSG business. So I've been solo sheep and goat small ruminant work since 2012. So it's been a good journey.
Nice. No, that's good. Well, and today here we're sponsored by Pets, Professional Embryo Transfer and Supply, and then they are out of Canton, Texas. Thank you, Pets, for helping us out and for always being here with us. Today we're here with professionals that perform a lot of embryo transfer in sheep and goats. They do have a vast experience in different states and different countries, like Dr. Fernandes that performs in embryo transfers in UK, Brazil, and here. And he does a lot of he has his own also practice in Brazil. That's great to bring all that experience into our podcast. A brief on small ruminants numbers here in the US. This is just data from the USDA that I got doing some research. All sheep and lambs inventory in the United States on January 1st of 2023, total on 5.2 million head. In goats and kids inventory, it's around 2.51 million head. This is just to give us a brief on the total amount of animals we're dealing with in the country. And we also have some interesting data on that we collected at the AETA. We haven't had a lot of people bringing that data back, but we do have some data also on numbers of collections and numbers of embryo transfers and amount of embryos frozen in the US. Okay, I'm not gonna be telling you just reading to everybody all the numbers, but in the middle of the conversation we can go over those numbers if we need. This is just to give us some support here and some background to what we're talking about. The first question will be towards Clem, Dr. Neely. So Clem, what advanced reproductive technologies are out there? And this is just for a public, remember that we do have people such as yourselves that know a lot about it, and we also have students that know nothing about it. What advanced reproductive technologies are out there today for small ruminants? And when did it start? Why is it becoming so popular? And if you can, please compare it with the bovine ET, since it's the most, I guess, common in practice out there.
Okay. All right. So keep me on track if I get veering off too much. But so yeah, and really, I know being an AETA podcast, most of our listeners are going to be have a cattle background, whether that's dairy or beef. And really, I feel like the small ruminant industry is really where the beef cattle the cattle industry was, maybe 10 to 15 years ago, when it was still primarily conventional ET, and that's what is really what's taken place. And so on what we say conventional or multiple ovulation ET, there's really a couple different techniques in small ruminants that are performed. The most common would be a surgical laparoscopic assisted technique, and that's we're sedating the animal. We're putting the doe or the ewe in a cradle, putting her in a declined position, and we're actually exteriorizing the uterus and flushing each horn with flush media, and it's really a one-way flush or lavage. And then we're collecting embryos, and then we're evaluating them underneath a microscope. Once we get those embryos, and let me backtrack a little bit too. I mean, there's also a cervical collection or transcervical collection, which is more similar to what a collection would be in cattle. That still involves the animal being under general anesthesia, so there's still that component to it. But either way, surgical or non-surgical, once we get those embryos and we look at them underneath a microscope, the evaluation is very similar. We use the same grading scale, the same IETS grading scale. Things that will be different, the subtle differences is there's a wider range in the stage of those embryos in terms of early morula to, hatch blastocyst. And, I'm sure Leo and Tad will give some insight on that too. And primarily we're working with goats in my practice. We do some sheep collections from time to time, but, you run into a wider array of stages is probably the biggest difference I can think of comparing it back to cattle ET. And
But
so,
but just so sorry, Clem, just so like the audience understands, like, so the most popular ones would be like, the surgical flushes and the surgical laparoscopy AIs. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah,
Okay. And those two are two separate techniques, and they basically like you just like comparing to cattle. When you AI the donor, it's basically the laparoscopy AI, and when you flush the donor is when you're doing the conventional flush on the cow.
yeah. And getting onto the AI subject, I mean, there's multiple different ways of doing that as well. So, laparoscopic is one way, and that's, sedation takes place. We put them in a cradle. We're visualizing the uterus and, placing a laparoscope in there, visualizing the uterus and, AIing with a pipette that has a little needle. So you're going through the serosal layer, that outer layer of the uterus and depositing semen into the lumen of the uterus. There's also transcervical AI, and that can be done with some success. And then also what is becoming more popular, more so on the goat side than sheep, would be a splash AI, where it's not even, there's no attempt to pass the cervix. It's actually just taking fresh semen or chilled semen. There's really no frozen semen that this is being done with, to my knowledge, and just kind of coating the outer cervical os and hoping that it will transverse the cervix. As far as like what's done prior to surgical flush, I mean, any of those methods can be done, and also just natural service as well. Earlier on, natural service, a lot of practitioners preferred that over other techniques, just for the simple fact that they didn't have to be there 6 days before. And, and as more people had the ability to laparoscopic AI and there was more people around doing it, there's a lot more of that taking place, like lap AI before flush. So.
No, that's great. That's a good explanation. Thank you, Clem. I mean, I believe like, it's a really like, different approach compared to cattle. But like you said, the IETS, like, classification is a little more wide because you do get those early morulas more often. And then we sometimes have to kind of explain, like, since the beginning or since it started, so the new graduates that are listening to us also can start to understand. I'm gonna go towards here right now, just making asking something to Ted, and towards like, Ted, what do you think are the challenges in the small ruminant artificial breeding market? And we're more trying to know about medication availability, off-label drug use, judicious use of all drugs, education of non-livestock production clients.
Sure. Yeah, I think I think because we are in a small species industry, those are challenges that we're always going to have to face compared to the whether it's the cattle industry or the swine industry. Medications are not often, the drug companies aren't looking to get everything labeled for small ruminants, right? So we do have some of those challenges out there, and we often here in the U.S. it's kind of interesting how we have to adapt some of the other medications to our needs. And so pretty much everywhere else in the world, PMSG is the drug of choice. And here in the US, we're using PG600. And, while PMSG is the active ingredient in PG600, we still don't have approval for PMSG in its pure form here. So we're kind of at the mercy of the PG600 supply from the swine industry to us in order to utilize that in our synchronization protocols. So, just some of those
back order. So sorry, that which was back order, like it is back order right now. Is that correct?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been a real challenge. And then as all of the cattle practitioners know, the supply chain issue with FSH was also it also impacts the small ruminant world as it does you guys, as it does the cattle practitioners, with what we went through really up until the last few months. And the interesting thing is there's other products in the world that we're not privy to at this point because of licensures or approval processes. So we'll face those same things that the cattle practitioners do in terms of what we utilize in the small ruminant world. I think when we do a lot of sheep work, we also do a lot of goat work. And interestingly enough, like the goat producers and the goat breeders, we deal with a lot of parasite resistant issues. So one of our big challenges over the years is how do we train and educate these folks who are not particularly always livestock people or have much of a background or education in it. How do we educate them to do things well? And one of those things is the parasite resistance. And so we're constantly kind of working towards that as far as whether it's the off-label drug use. And then we also are faced with the challenge of most of our small ruminant producers. If an animal looks at all or pretends to be sick, the first thing they do is give them a shot of antibiotics. And that actually may not be what they need, but that's what they've been told to do. And so when you talk about the judicious use of medications and drugs, I think that falls into it. So as we look forward into this market, into this industry, those are some of the things we're going to have to take heed to, and then also take reference to what other countries are doing. And so, I had the good fortune to work a little bit in Western Australia a couple of years ago, and how they approach things. And I was recently in a conversation with Dr. John Hepburn, who's been all over the world doing this type of things. And so when you look at what they do in New Zealand and what they do in the UK, like they're not giving antibiotics at embryo transfer time and or at AI time, and those because there's not a proven need for it, right? And I think here in the US we tend to probably overuse antibiotics and some of those kind of things, but there's an education curve that goes with that. So we have a big obligation to our clients and the producers in the small ruminant world to educate, and whether it's education on, obviously we're here because we're reproduction veterinarians and we have a passion for that, but there's also a lot of education that's going to go into how do we care for and manage and take care of these animals the best way for them, but also the best way for the long-term sustainability of the industry. So I think education is probably one of the biggest challenges that we feel like we face as a company.
Dad, and what do you do when you have your clients that don't have they're just getting started, I'm talking about those clients that come to you with hey, yeah, my kids start showing lamb and, I don't know, they're just starting to show sheep, and then they want to start breeding them, and then people that know nothing. Is it easier? Is it more difficult? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so I think you also have to split that into subsets, right? So because our business is predominantly driven by the show stock industry, there's the folks who like you said started in 4-H or started into the program of showing a few animals and then started to raise them. We also have another subset of folks who these are pets, so as we look at the importation of Kerry Hills, Valley Blacknose, Dutch spotted sheep, we look at a lot of these folks who are are buying these as novelty animals, and they become a pet. And so their education, training, and background is different than the 4-H family, which is different than the large scale producer. So there's 3 different kind of model, or 3 different kind of clients that you have to be able to try to train and educate to, and it creates some challenges, on how do you approach it, and still, whether it's showing empathy to the situation, or what level of education do we start with. And we have to be able to scale it, everything from the very basics all the way to the, honestly, a lot of our big scale producers are, they're almost as well educated as we are, and so you have these in-depth conversations about programming and hormone management, and why do we do this and how do we do that, and so you go from that all the way down to the most basic 101 levels. So it's a significant challenge.
And do you have, I mean, I know you have a big a team around you as well. So, and do you have to prepare your team to basically help to give, for instance, your receptionists, your technicians, are you preparing them to also help to educate the clients?
Yes. Yeah, we spend an awful lot of time on staff and team development. And so we have a person that's dedicated to development of human resources and development of our staff. And we've spent a lot of energy into, and I guess I'll throw this term out there, and I don't mean not self-promoting it. You kind of create that RSG way, right? So how do we get every one of our staff members to sing from the same songbook, or explain things the same way? Because over the years, I mean, and I told somebody this today, to be honest with you, I've learned so much more from my failures in life and in business and in practice than I ever have from the successes or victories, right? So you have that day where you flush some donors and things go extremely well, and you got a huge average and all the recips are good, and you walk away from it and you're like, yeah, I did a great job. But you forget that one. You remember the things that you didn't do well. You remember those days that you're like, crap, that didn't go as planned, or other complications you have. And so one of those things that we've learned over the years was, how do we get everybody to explain things the same way? And so it's been really important to lay out almost the manual, or lay out the bullet points of, here are the main points that everybody has to understand. And so when you talk about hormones, or you talk about how they work, it's really important to create that education for our staff, and create that education for our own people, so that if the phone rings and I pick it up, which this morning I had an early call with someone who had an issue with polytropin, so if I explain that to them, or if Blair in the office explains that to them, or if Doug in the office explains that to them, are we explaining it the same way? Because differences in verbiages can confuse folks, and it might be the exact same thing, right? But if we don't share that information uniformly, then it does create a confusion.
And did you guys have the same challenges in Australia, or with clients as well, or is that different from here?
Way different. So when I get to go to Australia to work, I love it, because all I have to do is be a veterinarian. And so I show up that day, they send me in a car, I AETA, do whatever it is, and I go home and I drink a glass of wine, and I respond to emails. It's a wonderful life. Those producers, it's a completely different scenario. So with the opportunities there, we get to work with, effectively one breeder, one producer at a time on a day. And so they all have a certain level of production. They also have a certain level of education. And so it's actually a different system altogether, where here we have a lot more smaller producers, and on any given day we might have 20 or 30 clients on any given day, and they all have a different level of education or training. And so you're constantly, effectively reading the room, and what does this person know, and what does that person not know, and how do you make that experience great? That's the other piece of, we have to be, yes, we're veterinarians, but we're also ambassadors to the industry. We're ambassadors to what we do. And so how do you make that experience great for the pet owner who's there doing an embryo transfer, versus, the large scale producer that's asking us to reproduce their livelihood. There's that scale that we have to adjust to.
No, that's great. I love the answer, and sorry I kind of extended that question a little bit, but with your um, multicultural like background there, I had to ask. Now I'm gonna turn more into Leo. I had a question for you and for Ted because jumping into the boat of like working in other countries. What are the future growth centers for small ruminants? And what roles does the US play in the genetic market? And what other countries have a big influence in small ruminant embryo transfer?
Well, in my opinion, there is a big market for that, but the main market is gonna be for the pure animals, for the production animals. In US, we most have the 4-H programs um, fine. So in the world, they're not interested on this kind of market. I think the world demands more the purebred and the production side of it. Okay, so like Brazil, we import semen from US from the dairy goats. Okay, so like China demands meat animals, meat sheep. There's a lot of demands for that. India also demands meat goats. In my opinion, when we have all these productions, all these farm productions here really good, they're gonna export more and more. So I think it's just the beginning now, and I can see a lot of potential in the farms here to export, um, and I'm sure Pat probably see that as well. Everything that the farmers do in America, they try to do the best, what's is really good. And we already have market for, and I'm sure it's gonna increase more and more on the next few years. But it's definitely the market, in my opinion, is for the production stock and not the show sheep or show goats. I think this market, I don't really believe gonna export much, but on the pure breeds, I think it's a market for.
Got it. No, thank you so much. Dr. Thompson, do you have anything to add on the question?
No, I think Leo's correct. The export piece is probably not the show stock world that a lot of our business is in. But one of the interesting things, and I should have looked it up. So let me step back. So one of the in sheep specifically. So if you look at the global piece of that, so there's only 2 countries in the world that are considered scrapie free, and so that's Australia and New Zealand. And within a very short period of time, the U.S. will reach that status. The USDA has done a lot of work over the years in eradicating the scrapie disease and testing and all those kind of things. And I think we're 5 years. I want to say we're 5 years into not having a scrapie positive animal in the U.S. And so I can't remember if it's 7 or 8 years when we would be classified as scrapie free. So I think those export opportunities will increase, and especially if we hit that status of being able to say that the U.S. is a scrapie-free country, then that opens up a few more avenues, even if they're pass-through avenues, right? So like currently, some of the countries that we can't bring genetics into, we can send those genetics to New Zealand, allow them to be born, collect those genetics, and then bring them to the U.S. So there's different avenues for that. So I do think the export piece has legs for the future. Currently, it's not particularly significant, but that's out there.
No, that's good to know because we sometimes we understand we see the way the market is here like in America and we don't have an idea on how it works in other countries. Australia and New Zealand, of course, they are huge kind of countries on the production of especially lamb meat, and we sometimes we kind of don't have like an understanding on how it works out there. But in terms of like embryo transfer, um, would you guys consider that Australia? I don't know if Australia combined with New Zealand would be the biggest heavy hitter in the market, or is that, or who do you guys think it will be?
I'll take this question before Ted. I know he owns RSG and probably he will. I don't know if he's gonna say what I want, but I'll say it. I think I work in a lot of countries in the world and seeing a lot of these um, big embryo transfer companies, and I think U.S. today is one of the biggest embryo transfer producers in the world for small ruminants. And of course, UK is still a big producer, Australia too, and New Zealand. But I really think America is very fair or up of all the world. So you guys doing a lot of embryo transfer over here, and I'm sure is one of the biggest in the world.
Got it. No, that's great to hear. Also, like we were having a brief conversation here prior to the podcast, and then Leo, that goes to you again. Since you're the one here that does IVF and aspirations, does IVF have a future in small ruminants? That's the first question. And then we're also gonna ask what is missing for IVF to take off, and does goat and sheep IVF work the same? And how successful it is to compare to conventional collection.
All right. So I'm sure AVF is coming up. It's it's not just coming up. It's already we already have some data on, and we've been working on that for a long time. I mean, no longer as I want to, but it's definitely AVF is the future, and there is opportunity for that. In my opinion, we still need get a little pieces inside of the lab better, and maybe we could work a little bit on the protocols for AVF, so get the ostis maturate better. When we aspirate, we have a better quality of the ostis as well. Um, on AVF, what I really can see great is when we can start working with the sexed semen on it. So that's gonna be a really goal for us. Um, but definitely the AVF is on and working already. It's not as successful as the embryo transfer. Um, I would say on the goats today we have more success than sheep. We're working around, I would say, 30% of embryos back after aspiration on goats. And sheep, we probably drop that to 20%, but we still have a big variation between um, aspiration days, right? It's not on a embryo transfer, we have more successful and than on the AVF. And I really think it's just how was cattle 15 years ago. You know, when we started, everyone was saying, "Now cattle not gonna have no AVF not gonna work," and now they have all the data and everything, and the cattle just go AVF almost everything. Of course, there is some species, you know, and you cannot use it. Don't work as good as the others because they are like milk cattle, big producers, and things like that affect the result of the AVF. But it's definitely AVF is a technique that works for cattle. So on the sheep and the goats industry, there is a big market for that, but also there is a lot of work we still need to get done to get the successful we want. We have some media tested. I actually tested media for three, four big companies in my own lab at home, and so there is a lot of people researching for that and doing a lot of good work. on medias and protocols for AVF, and I'm pretty sure in few years we're gonna be more and more successful. We just need more data and more work.
And
That's it.
Leo, just a question on your answer here. So just explain to us, like, it seems like part of our audience, they don't know much about like how IVF would be successful in sheep and goats. So is it like, so I would just assume it is laparoscopically done and
Yeah.
all the animals are stimulated. Do you stimulate them like, with FSH? How does that work? Explain to us how is the process of doing the OPU in goats and sheep.
All right. On APU on goat and sheep or embryo transfer on goat sheep, both has a protocols, hormone protocols where we use FSH on. All right. So then we're gonna aspirate the oestis, aspirate the follicles, and get the oestis out of the sheep or the goat, and then send them to the lab. So in the lab, we have these oestis in lab. They're gonna go through the maturation time and then day fertilization. So we're gonna fertilization them on the lab, and after 6 or 7 days, we got these embryos, and then we're gonna implant that on the receipts that already match the same protocol as the donors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's similar to the transfer process, and the amount of days is similar to like what you guys do on the conventional collection. And but the process of aspiration, you have to stimulate the sheep or the goat, and then basically go there and you're aspirating those oocytes that are stimulated previously with fultropin or Lucet, whatever's available. Um, and do you guys also implant a seeder on those? Do you start that with GnRH? How does that work?
We basic yeah, we can, that is like 2 3 different protocols for the case, but it's basic by progesterone implant on them, and then we just after a few days we just do a few injections of FSH on them, and then when the follicles are, we pull out the seed, or we 2 days before we pull the seeders we aspirate them. Sorry, 2 days after pull the seeders. No, hold up. Sorry about it. So we have the protocol is progesterone, FSH, and then on the AVF we're gonna aspirate the follicle before um, when the follicles are ready and big, we aspirate them and send the oestis to the lab. On conventional ET, we pull out the seeders and then we breed the animal. We laparoscope II or we bred the animal, and they gonna have these embryos inside of them for a week. So on a conventional ET, the animal gonna hold the embryos for us. On the aspiration, on the APF, the lab is gonna hold the embryos for us. And
No, that's
after,
great. So you have like the sheep or the goat being your lab when you're doing conventional, and then on the IVF you're sending the oocytes to the actual lab and maturating and fertilizing over there. But all of your IVFs are done with the animals being stimulated plus receiving progesterone. Is that correct?
yes, that's correct. It's different than the cattle, because in the cattle some people does without stimulation, but we don't. We need to stimulate it because we see a lot of difference on oostic quality to get the embryo. So we need them have a good quality to get them fertilized to be an embryo on AVF. So that's one of the reasons we stimulate them with some hormones to uh, get a big number and better quality of the oocytes.
Yeah, I did a little bit of a laparoscopy OPU in calves when I worked for Sexing Technologies. I assume it's pretty similar. I have never done like in small ruminants. I have flush goats and sheep, but like have never like aspirated. But I assume it's similar because in the laparoscopy process, it's just like I believe the difference will be like we have basically like just like a respirator in cattle. I'm not sure if you guys would have that like in sheep and goats.
Yeah, I also have been spray heifers, like 2 3 months old heifers, by laparoscope as well, and I have been successful on that. But the difference between is just the protocol, but the technique will be very much the same for small ruminants and heifers.
Yeah. No, it's great experience, like, and then like, learning some different, like, techniques, like, laparoscopy OPUs, flushes, embryo transfers. That's just like great to hear the experience that you have, Leo. Thank you for that. And now I'm gonna switch gears here a little bit, and I'm gonna just like uh after, I don't know if anybody else want to contribute to the IVF topic, if Ted or Clem, if you guys want to have any opinions there.
Yeah, I might ask Clem a question.
Yeah, go
So,
ahead.
so thinking about the IVF bit, and I don't have any experience in cattle IVF. Are you seeing a difference between, and this is, so the cumulus complex in a cow oocyte versus a goat or a sheep? Do you see any differences in what you're retrieving on aspiration day?
Oh, so I wouldn't be really a good one to ask on that since I haven't done any of the aspirations, but I know on the cattle side, well, just on the cattle side, I mean, you can get wide variation. And we're trying to salvage as much of that cumulus as we can and keep that intact with the oocyte. My practice in particular, we're pretty much stimulating all those donors. We're not doing any non-stim collections. So, you have more opportunity with those bigger follicles to have more cumulus complex.
Mhm.
But yeah, sometimes I feel like, you get some of those larger follicles on the cattle side, and I would be very interested to see what you think on the small ruminants if this is the case too. But you can have complications with retrieval rate on stimulated cattle donors if the follicles get pretty decent size. And then also it seems like you'll run into some viscosity or increase in viscosity in that follicular fluid that can also cause you a little bit of detriment in terms of your collection rate.
Yeah.
But the general
That's,
consensus is
but
more
that's
cumulus has, the better as far as development.
but Clem, that's mostly like, on the ones that don't receive a progesterone like implant, the viscosity should be increased. Is that correct?
No, we will see it on donors that
See on
have
donor?
cedar implants. Yep.
Got it. Do you guys, Leo, do you guys see like that comparison that Ted was talking about between like oocytes having cumulus?
Well, that's a good question. So when on a sheep and goats, we've seen a big variety of that. A lot of don't have the Kumu cells. And that's when we started, we thought it was like the aspiration pump, how strong was the aspiration, things like that. So we changed the technique, we go back and forward. And my end customer, my expertise is not really the technician. So we have a lot of OSTs that know grade one, what how you call, we grade them, right? So grade one could be the best one. And we have probably around, I would say 40 to 50% uh, grade one horses. So that's why I was saying I think we still need to have some protocol that we could mature these horses a little more, or just think about maybe um, the age of the animal you're working with or something. But that's definitely um, I think I'm looking forward to do more and more and really have an answer for that. But that's what we're seeing today for my database from today. I think I would like my horses have a little bit more common cells outside because the ones that have the common cells makes us better rates on the embryo. So
No,
that's what I think.
that's good to compare. Dad, do you see that like I know you guys haven't done OPUs, but have you guys ever like had to transfer uh embryos that were like generated in IVF lab or were frozen in IVF lab at your practice?
Yeah, and so I've been doing OPUs. We're not commercially making it available at this point. So we're still trying to create a better product. And so it's a number. We found it to be a numbers game. Where on the goat side of things that we do, we can get significantly more oocytes to start with, and so we get at a significantly higher development rate on the goat side compared to the sheep side. And so far we've put in, I think 80% or 90% of what we've gotten back has been put in fresh, and so we're not putting in very many of those frozen. But the numbers that we have done, it seems like the glycerol frozens have been better than the EG frozens on that side. But I've been very frustrated with my collection rates, and you count follicles and you collect, and you're like, well, you should have gotten more than that, and then or you look at it and you're like, I don't know why I got that many. It's been an interesting challenge to look at, and with everything that these guys are sharing is, I agree 100% with. There's probably a protocol adjustment that we need to figure out along the way.
And for instance, in cattle, Clem, I don't know if you agree with me, but like normally we get like a 70+% on recovery on stimulated cows. Is that normal for goats when you're aspirating them to recover at least 70% of the oocytes, Ted?
Yeah, we're probably close to that on the goats. I don't know on the sheep side. I don't feel like we are, and we don't get that good of stimulation on the ewe side. But on the goat side, I think we're probably close to 70% on that. But then
do you have a gut feeling why is that not like being so successful in sheep? Like, what's the hiccup there?
I don't know, and to be fair, like there's folks in New Zealand and the UK and places that have they're a lot smarter than I am, and they've spent a lot more time working on it, and they still haven't figured it out either. So I'm really hoping one of those guys will crack it, and then we can piggyback off their success. But I don't have an answer on the sheep side.
No, that's good. That's good that we're learning right now. And then like, are you guys aware? I know we're talking just about like a sheep and goats, but just to kind of exaggerate here a little bit, but are you guys aware of like, I know the US has done a lot of work in deer as well. Is that correct? So is there any other than laparoscopy AI advanced reproduction techniques used in deer that you guys are aware of?
Yeah, there's Dr. Rachel Weiss in Pennsylvania would be a good one to talk to on that. I know she's done some embryo transfer, obviously done the AI, but also done embryo transfer, and I think she's also done some aspiration on that piece of it as well.
Nice. Now that's just like a curiosity that I always had, and like I believe our audience would have that as well. But like, I'm gonna jump into a question here right now, just to finalize this whole subject about IVF. I'm gonna switch gears here towards Clem and ask him like, Clem, how do we improve the veterinary presence in the industry and combat the non-veterinarians doing surgical procedures? I know that's a tough question, but like we have to ask today.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a pretty difficult one to answer. And to me, it's like I try and think of why it's that way in the first place. And, going back to, well, really one of the original questions, I don't feel like I really hit on it very well, but like, why and how the embryo transfer industry started in small ruminants in the US. And I mean, it started very much the same way that the cattle ET industry started with, people wanting to import genetics. Well, most on, speaking strictly from the goat side here, but, a lot of that revolved around the boar goat. So that was imported from South Africa in the mid 90s. And that's a lot. So some of those, not 100% sure. I can't remember if it started off with embryo transfer or if there was some live animal imports, but trying to get rolling with that breed and create, more boar goats. And really, in my mind, the demand for embryo transfer greatly outpaced the veterinarians that had the ability to do it, because there really wasn't much of an industry, an embryo transfer industry for goats, for small ruminants, you know, prior to. So you had, there was obviously demand that wasn't being met, and you had people that, had received training and, were able to do the procedure. So that's kind of the way that I feel that it started, or why it was that way. Um, and the other thing with that is, things are only going to get more complicated as time moves on in terms of, you know, dealing with practice acts. You don't really see practice acts get looser over time in terms of like state veterinary practice acts. And then also, you know, drugs that will end up being on controlled substance lists. And I think that's one of the biggest things is that, there are non-veterinarians that are involved with it, which in my mind, you need, for this industry to be what it can be. I mean, you need as many people involved with it as you can, but it still needs the veterinary oversight. And then, when you think of different procedures, when you think of the laparoscopic, surgically assisted procedure, so you're exteriorizing that uterus, it would be really hard to find, a practice act that does not, define that as surgery that needs to be performed by a veterinarian. So, I mean, that's one thing, for sure. And then, yeah, also going back to the controlled substance, a lot of people, will use xylazine, which for the most part in most states is not a controlled substance, but there has been, a significant push for that to happen. And at some point in time, it may happen where it's a federal controlled substance. I think there's 3 states that it is a controlled substance on the state level. So that's, to me, the biggest challenge is like, it is a surgical procedure. And, for a lot of times we're dealing with controlled substances. Like if you're using like a ket stun, like a ketamine, butorphanol, xylazine mix, I mean, 2 out of the 3 of those are controlled substances. So what do we need to do? I think from an AETA member perspective, it's more about getting more veterinarians involved. Some of these clients, they probably feel like they don't have an option, that they, are going to have to travel several hundred miles just to get to a veterinarian that does these procedures. So I think making a push to try and get more veterinarians involved, um, and interested in offering the procedures itself. I think that's probably, one of the biggest things that we can do. And another thing too is, I mean, veterinarians that are already involved in it, we need to hold ourselves to a high standard, and not necessarily brag ourselves up, but do things to the best of our abilities, and and then kind of let things fall where they lay. And that's the my biggest thing is like, we just need to get more people involved, more veterinarians involved and trained to do this procedure or do these procedures, and then
And
try to offer good service.
I'm just gonna add one thing here, Clement. For the people listening to this podcast, I just want to say that like the ATA promotes a training every other year. We might be able to get that to every year, but we don't know yet. But like every other year, we do have a training for veterinarians. And that's one thing that the ATA is going to be working on with Clem and other veterinarians that are trying to kind of train more people, more veterinarians that are able and capable to do that efficiently. When it comes down to the veterinary X, I think there's some frustration on that. When it comes down to basically you go to the board and you say, hey, there's a lay guy in my area that he's performing like, lab AIs. And they're gonna say, yeah, what can I do about it?
Right.
They can do nothing about it because they are not veterinarians. So at the end of the day, what I heard about, just like speaking to another practitioner like another day, he came to me, he's like, oh yeah, there's a lay guy in my area, and he basically is getting ketamine from the people in the streets. And that becomes like, more of a kind of a DEA issue. And then like I believe it's a more difficult situation, and reporting to those guys, it's an option.
But I
And
think, if you look at if you again go back to the international piece of this conversation, and you talk to the practitioners in Australia specifically, because that's a much older industry than we are, and they've dealt with the same thing. And their practice acts, as well as the practice acts in the US, are actually designed to police the veterinarian.
Mm-hmm.
They're not actually designed to protect the veterinarian. And so the state licensures don't actually go after a non-veterinarian to enforce those laws, if that makes sense. They're only there to enforce those rules and laws against a licensed veterinarian. So the lay people actually, unless it goes into the, like you said, the DEA, or goes into the, food chain, or goes into the attorney generals of those states or something like that, the practice acts are not there to protect the veterinarians. They're only there to police the veterinarians.
which is important for us, like to voice our opinions here, because at the end of the day, this is a podcast, and then people will listen to us, saying that we have a frustration on our end that, like, we have lay people out there performing surgeries. Of course, like Clem explained, we have to raise the bar. We have to make sure more veterinarians can perform the procedure, and then we have more options closer to the producers. That's great, and then this is needed. But however, like Tad said, we also have to like have protection, especially from the AVMA or whatever state you're in. They should be protecting the veterinarians more than trying to just police the veterinarians that are currently like trying to do perform their jobs, right? I think that's really important as well. But in your guys' opinion, is there how I'm sure we all have like lay practitioners like in our areas that practice. Is there a way to kind of protect yourselves against that, or?
Well, I think, Clem was 100% right. The reason they've evolved is because the demand was there that we didn't meet the need for. It's the same thing when I was in equine practice. This debate raged over equine dentists, and so should that be a veterinarian? Should it not? Are these animals getting sedated? Are they not? And it's the same thing when there's, one of my early mentors was Dr. Justin Jansen, and he's a Kansas guy, not too far up the road there in Manhattan from you, Clem. But, his comment was the same thing. It's like, well, the demand's higher than the need of the qualified people who can do it. And to be fair with you guys, just because we have a DVM behind our name doesn't mean we're qualified to be really good at AI and ET. Like, some of those guys have done so much, particularly on AI side, that they actually get good results. And so when clients get good results, they ultimately don't care that we have a DVM or not, to be fair. Like that's the true reality of it.
So we just need to be more and better qualified,
Exactly. You have to out compete people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanna just jump on this conversation very quick. You're talking about training and everything, and it's one thing I've been seeing, not just in America, Brazil, or whatever. Everyone wants to do embryo transfer, or I wanna aspirate it, and I think our vet colleagues forgot things need to be step by step. So when I train people, they all come to me and say, Leo, I want to do embryo transfer. And that's not make chocolate. They need to understand all the base. So it's the same as you're making a house and you don't start from the foundation. You go straight to the top of the house. It's not going to work. The guys need to understand really how's the base starts to go. It's like how you collect semen, how you evaluate semen. That's the first thing. And then people just come to me. I have a lot of emails and things to train people. But when they come to me and ask me, oh, I want to do this, I said, no, I'm good. I can do II. I can laparoscope II, blah, blah, blah. And you look and you're like, oh man, you don't know what you're doing. Like another day, in another country, I got some frozen embryos and when I told them, they was all fertilized. And I was a vet, did the work. So I need to record it on a microscope and everything, on a stereoscope, and send to the vet and just say, look, dude, that's not an embryo. That's a no fertilized embryo, and you frozen it. And there was like two cells, a degenerate embryo, that embryo frozen as well. So it's basic. We need to have a training, or we need to train people, but they need to be trained from the start. Because most of our vet schools don't train us that. Doesn't matter if it's in the US, Brazil, UK, Australia. Most of the technique we have today wasn't. I didn't get that from university, and I believe no one of us did. Because especially in small ruminants, there is not many schools in the world to get good on that. So, in my opinion, the training need to be really focused to the beginning to get to the top of the house. Like, not start with the top. Start down there, and then you just grow to the top. So, and I don't believe it. Most of the trends, I don't really believe it because the people don't keep in touch. They just start and go. So when you have a training, you need to have more time because you're gonna hit a lot of different questions that you didn't see on the course, on the training. So that's my opinion on that.
That's really important, Leo. And then like that's why, and I'm gonna use this opening here that you just all the subject that you brought up right now to say that like that's why the AETA is trying to do what we're trying to do, to raise the bar, to like train people, to certify members, and to get people to a certain level that once you know it's been done by a certified ATA member, a veterinarian that's a certified ATA member, it actually was done properly, and we have, a stamp that can be put on the work. So, Clem, do you have any final considerations on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, like you said, like where the AETA stands, like, we're trying to incorporate small ruminants into certification, and steps were made to do that last year as far as, questions that were involved with the exam. And I kind of look, and it'd be interesting to have your opinion on this too, Ramon, but you think why, what's the benefits of being a certified member? And yeah, sure, like it does qualify you for export, but for me, I think it's a couple things that to me personally, like being certified on the cattle side, as well as what I hope it is on the small ruminant side at one point or at some point in time, is that you pass an exam that shows that you have a minimum level of competence in terms of embryo transfer, anywhere from physiology, donor management, resit management, as well as cryopreservation. So that you have a working knowledge. Of course, like, I mean, there is a lab practicum to it, but, and you have to submit, or show, that you've done a certain amount of transfers and collections. But the small ruminant side, and I think that Leo brought up a pretty good point too, like, and we haven't really talked about this too much, but especially in comparison to the bovine side, is how much more of a male component that there is in small ruminant embryo transfer, and being able to not only just evaluate semen, but collect, extend, you know, do a thorough job processing. And that's something that a lot of us on the cattle side that, we don't have to do. It's not something that we think about. But, I would say, and I think that, Leo talking about training being more all-inclusive and kind of starting from the foundation and coming up. I mean, there's definitely a lot of that needs to be taken into consideration when, if you're going to start doing small ruminant embryo transfer, is you got to incorporate the male component as well. But, where certification fits into that, or, that becomes, the sky's kind of the limit on that, because it's not something that, we're not as involved with, especially on the AETA side. But, I think that, if there's, a continuation of, trainings, I think that the AETA trainings they've done in the past, they've definitely had a male component to it. But it's just something that we need to, just think of, moving forward.
I think you guys are absolutely right. Clem, Leo, Ted, you guys are bringing great points here. Like, if I had to say what the ATA has brought to my career as an advantage on how do I perform my job on a daily basis, mostly knowledge, I would say, because at the end of the day, my reputation as a veterinarian is made by me, first of all, when I perform whatever I'm performing out there, and I'm obtaining the results that I'm obtaining, and the producers are either coming back or they're not coming back. And at the end of the day, if they're coming back, it's because first I'm able to apply the knowledge that I learned, and I have a huge, I would say, network of people like yourselves that I can count on and give a call or just like talk to or chat about it. Say, hey, I'm not so sure. I don't think this way. Mostly, of course, being certified is amazing. Being a member of the ATA is amazing, but there's a lot of knowledgeable people out there that we should bring them into the ATA to make this association even stronger, and including small ruminants into our association is going to make us even better. So at the end of the day, Clem, you asked my opinion what it means to me to be a certified member. I think it means a lot. Like you said, I have at least like a base to compare myself to any other practitioner, and having that ability to put a stamp out there and say, yeah, I'm certified. I've done X amount of OPUs. I've done X amount of embryo transfer, X amount of like lab AIs, will speak more about my career than anything else. But at the end of the day, guys, I mean, if we can help to train other veterinarians and grow this side of our association, the sky is the limit, just like Clem said, because we don't have like something set in stone right now. But in a year or two from now, I believe we will. We'll have like protocol. We'll have like a training process going every year. We're gonna have like changes that will be made, and we will need a lot of help to get that accomplished. But just want to kind of add the next question here to you guys, and that's already like kind of being coming in the middle of what we're speaking about here. How do we work to improve useful scientific content in the ATA meeting and drive science-based data to the producers? How do you guys do that? I'm going to leave that open to the three of you.
Well, I think like as far as like meeting wise, and the more small ruminant practitioners that you're able to get involved with the AETA, and the more of them that submit data, I think that's a big component to it. That way the practitioners that are new coming into it, they have kind of a bar that's set for them, okay, that say, okay, this is what industry average is, and this is what I should be striving for. And scientific content, I think there's people out there that that are real knowledgeable on embryo transfer to just donor management to recip management, herd health. One thing that I feel, and this is talking to several people that are involved with small ruminants, is the time of the year with the AETA. It makes it very difficult for some of those practitioners that are involved in small ruminant embryo transfer to attend, with it being in the fall. So I don't, who knows what will happen, but I mean, I think if something could revolve around the additional training, if there was maybe some CE opportunities, to basically make it more available, where some of these people could fit it into their schedule a little bit easier. I think that's, in my mind, one of the biggest challenges, and I think something that we need to look at.
But Clem, how do you bring that content of the scientific content to the producers of yours?
Oh, to the producers, I mean,
Yes.
it's just one of the things, like, to me, I kind of mentioned earlier, as far as like veterinarian versus non-veterinarian, you just have to hold yourself to a standard. You have to, make that information available to them. So I mean, it doesn't just end on flush day, So I think that's the other thing too, is being there, being available to troubleshoot any issues that arise, and prior to the flush, in evaluating pregnancy rates. You just have to be involved with your clients beyond just this, the embryo transfer day. I think that's the big thing, no matter what content that you're putting out there for them.
Do you bring like a meeting annually to your producers, or just like try to bring some information to them towards that?
We've done producer meetings in the past. I think that's a good opportunity. But to me, it's got to be more on a personal level with them. And so trying to be more inclusive on, other herd health things. And I think that's also kind of the veterinarian aspect that Tad mentioned earlier. I mean, there's more to being an ET veterinarian than just doing ET work. I mean, you have to be a veterinarian as well. So, I mean, I think that's one of the things that, as a veterinarian, I mean, should be one of your, um, kind of one of your advantages to them using you.
Got it.
Yeah, and I think
Guys,
like Clem's 100% right in the fact of, like when there's more to it than just being an AI and ET vet. One of the biggest concerns or questions we get is we have, we might be based in Indiana, but I'll get a phone call from a client in Oklahoma who says, I can't get a hold of anybody locally. What do I do in this situation? Because there's so few practitioners that want to mess with small ruminants. And to be fair, whether it's a monetary thing, they can, from a business standpoint, or just an experience standpoint, how do you take care of a situation of a lamb with polio, or whatever veterinary practice situation you want. There's a lot of folks who either don't care to mess with small ruminants or don't want to, and so those producers are not building relationships with their local veterinarians. And so, as the ET practitioners, we get asked a lot of those questions. And so building that relationship, the education and all that is huge.
Oh, that's great, guys. Just like what I'm gonna kind of finish the the podcast here today will be like just like Clem. We don't have any like updates on the training, but we know that's gonna happen next year. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's been happening on a 2-year rotation. I mean, I would just kind of be looking for it. I mean, the trainings that the AETA has done in the past has been in the been in conjunction with the American Association of Small Ruminant Practitioners. So they've done some joint trainings every other year, and it's been at Ohio State. And I'm trying to think what town. Maryville, I think, is like their kind of off-site large animal facility that's not there in Columbus. I think just north of Columbus. I don't know if that's where it'll be next year or not. But in the past, that's where it's taken place. But I think that in talking to facilitators at that event, I mean, it's something that is always well received. There's hardly any open seats for that event. So, I think it's something that from the AETA perspective, we need to continue and then also look to see what other things could we potentially add to it to provide value to maybe not only people that want training, but, maybe somebody that wants to get some additional CE on that specific topic of, embryo transfer and small ruminants.
And Ted, we were looking at like adding like an extra day to the training. I spoke with Clem about that many times, but we're trying to see if there's an extra day for CE only, for practitioners that wants to like basically just go there, not necessarily be part of the practical side because you guys already do a lot, but to just go to a meeting and then get like some CE hours. We're trying to see what's possible, based on what the conditions that we have.
Right.
So,
Sure. Yeah.
no,
That'd be
but
great.
I wanted to just like finish the podcast with like asking the three of you guys just to give your final considerations. Also, give a message to the new young veterinarians out there that wants to practice small ruminant AT, and just like it, kind of tell them what you start, how to do it. I mean, I know you guys all have done like great internships like in Australia and other places, but just give your message to them and to the ATA so we can continue to learn with you guys. And before you guys get started here, I'm just gonna thank pet supply embryologists around the world with most of the products that are needed to perform bovine, equine, and ovine embryo transfer. For more than a quarter century, Pets has been a world leader as an embryo transfer supply company. Our goal has always been and remains your success through excellent customer service, the best possible quality products, and our continued quest for customer satisfaction. This includes same-day shipping and most domestic and international orders to allow for a more timely delivery and optimal inventory control. Thank you, Pets, for sponsoring this podcast. I appreciate the help and always being with the ATA. Now is with you guys. Please, your final considerations, and once again, thank you. Go ahead, Clem. You get started.
All right. Well, like I said, it was a great honor to be a part of this. The small ruminant part of our practice, I mean, is something that's been kind of a slow, evolution. And it was more for me, trying to fill a void, and, the timing of it worked really well with, kind of the increase of, just number of people looking for that service out there. As far as like, a new graduate, I mean, it's not only just small ruminant embryo transfer. I mean, if it's really anything that you could add value to your practice, just being taking or getting enough confidence and being brave enough just to take that initial step. And yeah, I mean, just don't be afraid to search out people to go try and spend a week with. In my opinion, that's a great thing about the AETA is there's lots of great people that you can come into contact with by going to those meetings, and most people are out there to help. And I think that Tad would say this too. I know that they have a pretty extensive internship program, and I've talked to people that have done it, and they got a lot of value out of it. So just don't, reach out to us. That's the main thing. And don't be afraid to make that call.
Great. Go ahead, Leo.
Well, again, I would like to thank you guys to invite me to this podcast, and I think there was a lot of good questions and it's a great talk. For the young vets just coming around, in my opinion, the world needs good vets, and especially in small ruminants where I'm based off, we can't really find as many as we need. So we just work hard, and you're gonna get it as the same as everyone do it. I'm available to help anytime, and I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Leo. Ted.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and appreciate the opportunity to share with everybody. It's been a great opportunity. It's been great to catch up and meet you guys for the first time as well. I think new graduate wise, like the veterinary degree is, in my opinion, the best, most diverse degree you can accomplish and achieve, and it's an honor to be able to be a veterinarian and to get the opportunities to do the things that we do. And I was told a long time ago, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. And I think as young veterinarians, you need to remember that, and the sky's the limit. So the opportunities are out there for you. And probably the other word of advice is, you're the sum total of the four most important people around you. So if you have a goal and you have a dream, find the people who don't look down on other people's success. Those are the people you want to emulate and seek out advice from. So, if you want to achieve a goal, then go after it and find the people who you can learn from and grow from. And the beauty of veterinarians around the world is they're all pretty humble. They're all pretty available. They're all pretty willing to share, and they want to see other people succeed. So, this is the greatest industry in the world. If you're a new graduate, you better go after it. If you don't, it's your fault.
That's great. That's great piece of advice from all of you guys, all veterinarians with great experience, with great capabilities, and have done a lot for our industry. I really appreciate the three of you being here, talking a little bit with us, talking about embryo transfer in small ruminant, which is a novelty right now, becoming really popular. And I would encourage everybody that's listening to us today to, if you're a veterinarian student, or if you're a veterinarian, go to Toronto. Our meeting will be in October 17, I think, from the 17th to the 21st, if I'm not wrong. And it will be a great opportunity to interact with all of us. We will be talking there, and I will see you guys in Toronto. Thank you so much for this podcast, and we'll see you guys next month. Thank you for your audience. Bye-bye.
Thanks.